we did a lot of rural filming, of course, and so at that stage agriculture and farming were the backbone of the country. In fact, that was the reason really that underlay the decision to go into Expo, because Britain was leaving Britain was contemplating joining the EEC, as it was known then, the European Economic Community, and New Zealand was going to lose its preferred status, and so our politicians wisely decided that they should investigate markets closer to New Zealand, closer to home, and that was Asia. Jack Marshall, Honourable J.R. Marshall, who was a great fan of the film unit, was then Minister of Tourism and Publicity, and we came under the Tourist and Publicity Department. And Jack Marshall had decided on a film for the pavilion in Osaka. And I don't think there would have been one if it hadn't been for him. It was decided that the film, This is New Zealand, should encompass all 4 seasons. And so we had to shoot all 4 seasons, and it was quite a long list of requirements that the directors had decided on. So we had 3 crews, and the first crew was Kel Fowler, Hugh McDonald and me with a 3-camera rig, and then there were 2 other crews who were shooting single camera stuff. It was Geoff Scott, because he had been to Expo 67 in Montreal, and he had visited all the major film exhibits there, and I gather that many of them are examples of technology over method over content. He had decided that given the film unit's resources in hand and the limited budget that we had, that we would make a 3-screen movie. So the decision to do the 3-screen one was Geoff Scott's. I know one of Hugh's reservations when Geoff first broached the subject was, well, he wondered to himself really, what can you do with 3 screens that you can't do with 1? Well, I think the answer is in the film itself, isn't it? But it was an interesting exercise, and it took quite a while to get the hang of the way it was going to work, because they realised that it couldn't be random, and you had to have images that complemented each other with either movement or content. And finally, they began to get it right. Originally, the producer walked out and he went into Geoff Scott and said, no, it's a disaster, utter disaster. And Geoff had begun to get worried, because by this time we'd put a lot of resources into it. And then my boss in the sound department, Claude Wickstead, went into Geoff and he thumped the desk and he said, leave the boys to it, Geoff, they know what they're doing. I'm not sure that we did, but we did it. When Geoff approached Hugh McDonald to direct This is New Zealand, Hugh was floored initially, because, I mean, we were only in our 20s, and there were senior directors on the staff, and Hugh, expressed a sort of a view that perhaps the senior directors might object, but Geoff said, no, they won't, no, they're fine. And Hugh had made a film called After 90 Years, which was on Denniston, the Denniston Plateau, that plateau above Westport, the source of the best bituminous coal in the country, bituminous coal. And it was a very highly praised film. It ran in the movies in the shorts beforehand, and often there were 3 items within the one pictorial parade. But After 90 Years was a full-length 20-minute movie, and we heard at the time that quite a lot of people had actually gone to the movies just to see that. Couldn't care less what the feature was. So Geoff was quite pleased with Hugh at the time. That was in 1967. So he gave the job to Hugh, who then co-opted Dave Jordan. And so the two of them wrote and directed it and then edited it. And they worked out a roster. Dave did the night shift, Hugh did the day shift, and I got the weekend shift. Because we only had one editing machine, one 3-screen editing machine. So we had to take it in turns. Location sound was a real mission, because the cameras that we used in those days, the Ariflex 2C, sounded like a motor mower, one on its own, let alone 3 together. And it took Kel an hour to set up the 3 on a rig. So with the 3 cameras running, it meant I could be nowhere near with sound. And there was one occasion when we were shooting in the forest, I arranged with all the loggers to shut their chainsaws off when they heard a particular sound. I think we used the horn on a log hauler to warn them to turn off their chainsaws, and they'd all agreed to this. And I said I want 3 minutes of uninterrupted peace, quiet, to record the forest atmosphere, which was largely cicadas, but nonetheless, that's what it was. And so it was all agreed, all set, and yay, I had this wonderful quiet forest atmosphere for about 20 seconds, I would say. And director and cameraman can never remain quiet for that long. And suddenly there was this God almighty ape call echoing through the forest from 2 stentorian voices, which with as much atavistic ferocity as would have made King Kong tremble. And of course that was the end of it. And they were so pleased with themselves, they did it again and again. So yeah, recording on location was a real mission. But we did manage to get some good tree falls out of that. We had to buy 2 replay and 1 record triple track, 35mm triple track machines. And so I only ever had the 2 triple track replay machines to play with. So we had to do quite a bit of pre-mixing. But transferring the stereo tapes that I'd recorded in the field to 35mm was a real mission. That was probably the hardest part. Not necessarily the hardest, but the most time consuming. And we had to buy a new mixer, and 2 of us sweated over the mixer in the end. And of course, generally we had to mix in 1 hit. We didn't have what they now call rock and roll, or you just drop in. So you had to start from the beginning and keep going. And if you made a mistake, you had to stop and go back and start again. In the course of that, playing with stereo, I found I could make stereo sound from mono by replaying the mono sound, recording it onto 2 Nagras simultaneously and taking their replay and then altering the speed very slightly. And so I end up with what sounded like a true stereo image. But I tried that again with Dolby, and that was where we immediately ran into trouble because of the phase relationship. Dolby relied on phase accuracy, and if you shifted phase, then you got some weird effects. We had to work out a way of recording stereo sound on location, and that was a mission. Stereo was certainly available, but there weren't any portable stereo recorders then. We were told that the Canadians had built one of their own by butchering two Nagras or combining the two of them. But we, with New Zealand's limited overseas resources, we weren't able to sacrifice two Nagras. So we had to figure a way of recording stereo sound on location, and devised a means of controlling the speed of the two Nagras. So I had to use two Nagras around my neck and controlled them with a common frequency, a 50 hertz pilot tone that linked the two of them, which was great for recording, but a nightmare for replaying, because then the two had to be lined up precisely and played back together. And so I would record the two tapes from replay onto a 35mm 3-track machine, then run it back, take the reel off, and look at the beep, the single tones that I'd put on to sync the two together as a sync point, look at them under a magnoscope, and if it was 2 or 3 waveforms out or whatever it was, I'd worked it out. I'd have to redo it until I got it right. And it was simply a means of holding the two capstans of the two recorders together and letting them go like that at the same time. When we finished the film in '69, November, we had a week to screen the film to politicians and friends, and I've never forgotten that the first screening we had of a crowd of people, they came out in tears. Completely unexpected reaction. So it was stimulating really to know that in Osaka it went down extremely well, and then Hugh and Kel Fowler went over to make a film about Expo, and they got to know that it had become the most popular film in Expo, and it ran 7 days a week for, I can't remember how many hours a day, but it was all day, non-stop. When Archives New Zealand approached Hugh and me to ask if we would be interested in doing the digital remastering of it, I said to Dave Smith, who asked me, great, because there are 2 little things that have bothered me and I would just like to fix them up. He said, oh, you mustn't alter the integrity of the film. And I said, you won't even know. So it was a thrill after 40 years to come along and remaster the film. Yeah.
Sorry, could I ask what the 2 things were?
What was that, sir?
What were the 2 things that you wanted to alter?
Oh, insignificant. There was just a bird call that started and shouldn't have, and so and another hum in another place and something else. Yeah.